I am looking at CENTCOM flight data right now, and what I'm seeing is a total blackout of civilian transponders over the Persian Gulf, because in the last 60 minutes, the United States just issued a directive that the world has dreaded for 27 days. Tehran accepts total defeat by midnight, or the Pentagon unleashes hell on every hardened site from the Caspian to the coast. This is no longer a localized skirmish or a series of surgical strikes aimed at de-escalation. We are witnessing an existential threat to global energy and the literal collapse of the 1945 world order. For the average person watching this, it represents a direct and unpriced risk to your immediate financial security and the physical safety of the global supply chain. I will reveal the specific Option 9 protocol the White House just authorized, a plan so aggressive it has reportedly caused a silent mutiny within the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The red line hasn't just been crossed, it has vanished. We are moving into a phase of warfare that the modern world is fundamentally unprepared to process. What is the specific hell being unleashed? Which 3 U.S. allies just refused to provide the necessary airspace for the final blow? The countdown has begun, and the grainy night vision footage of B-2 spirits taking off from Diego Garcia tells a story that the official press briefings are trying to sanitize. The situation on the ground at 4 a.m. local time began with a secure line call between the Secretary of State and the Iranian Foreign Ministry. This wasn't a call for dialogue or a back-channel attempt at a ceasefire. It was the delivery of a midnight ultimatum. The choice of the unleash hell verbiage was intentional, a departure from traditional diplomatic de-escalation channels designed to signal that the period of measured response is over. This isn't a negotiation anymore. It's a funeral notice for the Iranian IRGC. The weight of this moment is underscored by the role of the 38 generals, a group of high-ranking military officials who warned that this specific ultimatum would force Tehran into a suicide strike posture. They argued that by leaving no room for a face-saving exit, the United States is effectively cornering a nuclear-capable regime into an all-or-nothing final stand. But there's one sentence in that ultimatum that the mainstream media is refusing to print, and it involves the specific coordinates for Silo 7. This is the technical meat of the escalation. To understand why Silo 7 is the center of this storm, we have to look at the evolution of American bunker-busting technology. The Pentagon has moved beyond the GBU-28 and is now deploying the GBU-57, also known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP. This is a 30,000-pound beast specifically designed to crack the Fordow enrichment plant, which is buried deep within a mountain. The math of this engagement is a nightmare of asymmetric proportions. On one side, you have the U.S. Carrier Strike Group, $20 billion of steel, F-35s, and high-tech sensors. On the other, you have Iran's swarm tactics. Think about the physics. 200 Zulfikar speedboats armed with Nasir cruise missiles charging a single Aegis destroyer. Even the most advanced VLS cell capacity on an American ship can be mathematically overwhelmed by sheer numbers. This is why the U.S. is shifting the fight to the space frontier. We are seeing the transition from chemical explosives to the concept of rods from God, formerly known as Project Thor. These are tungsten cylinders traveling at Mach 10 that deliver the kinetic force of a tactical nuclear weapon without any of the radioactive fallout. They are the only politically viable way to erase a site like Silo 7. Satellite imagery currently shows the repositioning of the USS Abraham Lincoln to a dead angle outside Iranian radar range, preparing for the kinetic shadow to fall. The Pentagon isn't planning to invade. They are planning to erase, and they're using the laws of physics to do it. However, the situation just took a sharp turn for the worse. Washington just realized that the coalition of the willing has become a coalition of the silent. In a move that has shocked the State Department, Turkey, Jordan, and Qatar have suddenly refused to grant U.S. forces overflight rights for this specific mission. Turkey is prioritizing the security of the Turkstream pipeline over its NATO obligations, and Qatar is being leveraged by Tehran through their shared interests in the South Pars gas field. This regional fracture creates a red-on-red danger. The loss of Jordanian airbases forces U.S. refueling tankers into the kill zone of Iranian long-range S-300 systems. It's a tactical paradox. Even more concerning is the secret Moscow-Tehran-Beijing data link. Evidence suggests that China may be providing real-time darksat telemetry to Iranian missile batteries, allowing them to track U.S. movements even when they think they are invisible. This brings us to the hidden truth of Option 9. Leaked memos regarding this protocol suggest it involves the total cyber integration and subsequent dismantling of Iran's power grid. We are talking about the first civilization-level cyber strike in human history. If Tehran doesn't blink, every hospital, water treatment plant, and air traffic control tower in the country goes dark simultaneously. This has caused a massive rupture between the White House and the Pentagon Cyber Command over the ethical implications of such a strike. But hold on, because if their grid goes down, yours might be next. The interconnected nature of global digital infrastructure means a strike of this magnitude rarely stays contained within national borders. The personal impact of this conflict is the supply chain tripwire. The Unleash Hell order has already triggered an 18% spike in insurance premiums for all tankers moving through the Strait of Hormuz. For the person sitting at their kitchen table in Ohio, a conflict on day 27 in Tehran means a $7 gallon of gas by day 30. Your 401k is currently tethered to a fuse that is only 21 miles long. That is the physical narrowness of the strait, a choke point where a single ghost division of Iranian submarines can end global trade in a matter of 14 minutes. As we reach the peak of this tension, the leaders are vanishing. Reports indicate that the Iranian supreme leader has not been seen in his usual compound for over 72 hours. When the bunkers go silent, it usually means the launch on warning protocol is active. The global map is lighting up in ways we haven't seen since the Cold War. Russia and China have moved their Mediterranean fleets to high alert status. The old world order didn't just crack today, it disintegrated. To synthesize the last 27 days, we have moved from a minor regional skirmish to a global ultimatum that carries the weight of total destruction. Tehran cannot accept defeat without a martyr strike, a final retaliatory act designed to inflict maximum pain on the way out. This means the next 48 hours are the most dangerous in modern history. While the world is panicking, being informed and ahead of the curve is your only real defense. They want you to be afraid. I want you to be ready. The timeline is accelerating. If you aren't tracking the movement of those 38 generals, you are blind to the real power shift occurring behind the scenes. We are returning to the CENTCOM flight data mentioned at the start. The silence in the skies is the loudest warning we've ever received. Tell me in the comments, do you believe the US will actually pull the trigger tonight? Or is this the ultimate bluff? How is the news of the gas price spike affecting your local area? The tripwire has been pulled. The only question left is, where will you be when the lights go out? We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next update. The sheer scale of the military assets involved is staggering. We are seeing a mobilization of the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne Division, not for a ground invasion, but to secure peripheral nodes that could be used by Iranian proxies in Iraq and Syria. The logistics of moving that many personnel and that much equipment in such a short window suggests that the planning for the Unleash Hell scenario has been in the works for months, if not years. The official readout from the Pentagon describes this as a defensive posture adjustment, but the movement of heavy armor toward the borders tells a different story. Financial flows also suggest that large institutional investors are pulling out of Middle Eastern markets at an unprecedented rate, signaling that this smart money expects the worst. In the midst of this, the human cost is already mounting. Leaked documents from international aid organizations suggest that the displacement of civilians in the border regions has surpassed 2 million people. The infrastructure damage from the previous weeks of strikes has left millions without reliable access to clean water or electricity. This is the reality of modern kinetic warfare. It doesn't just target the military. It dismantles the very fabric of civilian life. The diplomatic cables mentioned earlier indicate that several European nations are frantically trying to establish a green zone for humanitarian aid, but with the Unleash Hell ultimatum on the table, those efforts are likely to be stalled by the impending escalation. Market data indicates that gold and other safe haven assets are reaching all-time highs as the midnight deadline approaches. This is a clear indicator that the global financial system is bracing for a shockwave that could rival the 2008 crisis. When you combine the energy disruption with the potential for a massive cyber strike, you have a recipe for a global economic standstill. The central bank has signaled that it is ready to intervene with massive liquidity injections, but even that might not be enough to stabilize a market facing the reality of a total war in the world's most critical energy corridor. The Option 9 protocol, if executed, would represent a fundamental shift in how wars are fought. It's not just about bombs and missiles. It's about the weaponization of the very systems that make modern life possible. By integrating with the Iranian power obviously difficult to track in the shallow, noisy waters of the Gulf. If even one of these subs manages to deploy mines or launch a torpedo at a supertanker, the entire global trade network could seize up in an afternoon. This is why the insurance premiums have spiked so dramatically. It's not just the risk of a hit. It's the certainty that once the first shot is fired in the strait, no commercial vessel will move through it for weeks. The absence of the Iranian supreme leader is perhaps the most ominous sign of all. In a regime built on the image of absolute authority, the disappearance of the figurehead during a national crisis usually signals that the command and control structure has moved to a hardened, underground facility. This is where the launch-on-warning protocol becomes a terrifying reality. If the leadership feels that their personal survival is no longer guaranteed, the restraint that has kept this conflict from spiraling into a nuclear exchange could evaporate in an instant. The Mediterranean fleets of Russia and China moving to high alert is a clear signal that they are preparing for the fallout, both literal and geopolitical, of a total collapse of the Iranian state. We have spent 27 days watching this situation evolve from a series of provocations into a global crisis. The Unleash Hell ultimatum is the final chapter in the old way of doing things. Whether the trigger is pulled tonight or Tehran blinks at the last second, the world has already changed. The coalition of the silent, the shift toward kinetic space weapons, and the emergence of civilization-level cyber warfare are the new realities of the 21st century. Being informed is no longer just a luxury. It is a necessity for navigating the world that is being born in the fires of this conflict. The question of whether this is a bluff is the one that every world leader is currently trying to answer. If the U.S. doesn't follow through, its credibility as a global superpower is effectively over. If it does, we enter a period of uncertainty and destruction that has no modern parallel. The movement of the 38 generals suggests that there is a deep-seated fear even within the highest levels of the American military that this is a step too far. Yet, the momentum of the war machine often becomes self-sustaining once it reaches this level of intensity. The flight data, the empty civilian corridors, and the repositioning of the B-2 bombers all point to a single conclusion. The Pentagon is ready, even if the rest of the world is not. As we close this update, remember that the unpriced risk we discussed at the beginning is now manifesting in real time. The price of gas, the stability of your investments, and the security of the digital systems you rely on every day are all linked to the events unfolding in the next few hours. The tripwire has been pulled. The only question left is, where will you be when the lights go out? We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next update. The role of the GBU-57 MOP cannot be overstated in this context. To crack a facility like Fordow, which is encased in hundreds of feet of solid rock and reinforced concrete, a standard explosive simply won't work. The MOP works by using its immense weight and hardened steel casing to burrow deep into the earth before detonating. The shockwave alone is enough to collapse the tunnels and destroy the centrifuges without needing to physically touch them. This is the erasing that the Pentagon is aiming for. It is a precise, surgical, yet devastatingly powerful application of force that leaves no room for survival for those inside. Contrast this with the swarm tactics of the Iranian Navy. They know they cannot win a traditional ship-to-ship engagement with a U.S. carrier strike group. Instead, they rely on the death-by-a-thousand-cuts approach. Hundreds of small, fast, and highly maneuverable boats, each carrying a cruise missile or a heavy torpedo, can overwhelm the defense systems of even the most advanced destroyer. An Aegis ship has a limited number of interceptors in its vertical launch system. Once those are spent, the ship is vulnerable. This is the math that the Iranian commanders are betting on, that they can sacrifice 100 boats to take down one carrier. The inclusion of rods from God in this discussion might seem like science fiction, but the technology for kinetic bombardment has been researched for decades. By using the Earth's gravity as the primary source of energy, these tungsten rods can hit a target with the speed and impact of a meteor. There is no explosive payload, which means no radioactive contamination, making them the ultimate clean bunker buster. For a site like Silo 7, which is believed to house the most advanced of Iran's retaliatory missiles, a kinetic strike from orbit would be the most effective way to neutralize the threat before a single launch can occur. The betrayal of the coalition of the willing is perhaps the most significant geopolitical development of the last 24 hours. For Turkey, a NATO member, to refuse overflight rights is a major blow to the alliance's unity. It signals that regional interests, specifically energy security and the desire to avoid being a target for Iranian retaliation, now outweigh long-standing military commitments. Jordan and Qatar's silence is equally telling. Qatar, in particular, finds itself in an impossible position as it shares the world's largest gas field with Iran. Any strike that causes instability in that region could lead to the destruction of the very resource that sustains Qatar's economy. This regional fracture means that the U.S. is essentially flying solo in the final hours of this ultimatum. Without the support of these key allies, the logistical challenges of maintaining a sustained air campaign become significantly more complex. Refueling tankers, which are the lifeblood of any long-range strike mission, now have to take longer, more dangerous routes that expose them to the very air defense systems they are trying to avoid. This is the red-on-red danger, the risk that American support aircraft will be picked off by Iranian S-300 batteries while they are at their most vulnerable. The Moscow-Tehran-Beijing data link adds another layer of complexity. If China is indeed providing real-time telemetry to Iran, it means that the stealth advantages of American aircraft are being compromised. DarkSat technology allows for the tracking of heat signatures and electronic emissions that traditional radar might miss. This level of cooperation between the three nations suggests that they view this conflict not as a local war, but as a turning point in the global balance of power. By helping Iran survive the unleash hell scenario, they can effectively end the era of American military dominance in the Middle East. The ethical fracture within the Pentagon over Option 9 is a reflection of the changing nature of warfare. In the past, the lines between civilian and military targets were relatively clear. In the digital age, those lines have blurred. A cyber strike on a power grid doesn't just turn off the lights in a military base. It shuts down the incubators in a neonatal ward and the pumps in a water treatment plant. The 38 generals who have raised concerns about this protocol are worried about the moral and legal implications of such an action. They understand that the hell being unleashed is not just a military defeat, but a humanitarian catastrophe that will be blamed on the United States for generations to come. The impact on the global supply chain is already being felt in the form of increased insurance premiums and shipping delays. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil transit point, and any disruption there has an immediate effect on the price of energy. For the average person, this means higher costs for everything from gasoline to groceries. The 21-mile choke point is not just a geographical fact, it is a structural vulnerability in the global economy. The Ghost division of Iranian submarines is designed to exploit this vulnerability, and the mere threat of their deployment is enough to send markets into a tailspin. The vanishing of the Iranian leadership is the final piece of the puzzle. It suggests that the regime has accepted that the time for diplomacy is over and is now preparing for the martyr strike. This is the most dangerous phase of any conflict, when one side feels they have nothing left to lose. The launch on warning protocol means that any perceived attack will be met with the full force of Iran's remaining missile arsenal. With the Unleash Hell ultimatum set to expire at midnight, the world is holding its breath to see who will blink first. The transition from a regional skirmish to a global crisis has happened in the blink of an eye. The 27-day timeline has been a steady escalation of tension, rhetoric, and violence, leading us to this final, desperate moment. The Unleash Hell ultimatum is the culmination of years of failed diplomacy and mutual distrust. Whether it ends in a total military victory or a global catastrophe remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the world will never be the same after tonight. The authority we have built over the last 27 days is based on a commitment to tracking the facts and analyzing the implications without the filter of mainstream media. By focusing on the technical specs of the weapons, the geopolitical shifts of the allies, and the economic realities of the supply chain, we have provided a clearer picture of the crisis than any 30-second news clip ever could. Being informed is the only way to stay ahead of the curve in a world that is increasingly defined by chaos and uncertainty. The movement of the 38 generals, the silence in the skies over the Gulf, and the repositioning of the B-2 bombers all tell a story of a world on the brink. The Unleash Hell ultimatum is not just a threat. It is a promise of a new kind of warfare that will redefine the 21st century. Tell me in the comments, how are you preparing for the potential economic shockwaves of this conflict? Do you believe the Option 9 protocol is a necessary evil or a step toward a global disaster? We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next update. The final hours before the midnight deadline are likely to be the most intense. We are seeing reports of emergency meetings at the UN, but with the US and its remaining allies committed to the ultimatum, the chance of a diplomatic breakthrough is slim. The Unleash Hell scenario is now the primary path forward, and the consequences of that path will be felt by everyone, regardless of where they live. The tripwire has been pulled. The only question left is, where will you be when the lights go out? We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next update. The strategic depth of the Iranian defense must also be considered. They have spent decades building a network of underground tunnels, bunkers, and missile cities designed to survive the very kind of strikes the U.S. is now threatening. While the GBU-57 is a formidable weapon, it can only hit one target at a time. The sheer number of hardened sites across Iran means that even a sustained bombing campaign may not be enough to fully neutralize their retaliatory capability. This is the reality that the 38 generals are warning about, that the Unleash Hell scenario could result in a long, drawn-out conflict rather than a quick and decisive victory. The economic implications are also becoming more clear. Beyond the price of gas, the disruption of global trade through the Strait of Hormuz will lead to shortages of critical materials and components for industries ranging from electronics to automotive manufacturing. The just-in-time supply chain that the modern world relies on is not built to withstand a total war in its most important energy corridor. The 18% spike in insurance premiums is just the beginning. If the strait is closed, those costs will skyrocket, and the impact will be felt in every sector of the global economy. In the final analysis, the Unleash Hell ultimatum is a gamble of historic proportions. It is a bet that Tehran will value its survival more than its pride, and that the coalition of the silent will eventually fall back into line once the fighting starts. But it is a bet with stakes that involve the entire world. The next 48 hours will determine whether we are entering a new era of stability or a period of unprecedented chaos. We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next update.